What's up, old souls? This is Reed from Everyman Vintage, and thanks for tuning in to Record Recommendations. If you've been paying attention to Storied Sounds, you would have noticed that during the demo segment of each of those episodes, to my left and your right on the console stereo is a record recommendation. Many times, those recommendations have nothing to do with the instrument that is being demoed. So today we are talking about the record that I'm recommending from episode 3, where I talked about and demoed a circa 1900 Terce guitar. This has nothing to do with this particular record because today I am recommending Jimmy Smith's Organ Grinder Swing. This is from 1965. It was recorded on the Verb label, and I decided I really wanted to choose a Jimmy Smith record to share with everybody because Jimmy Smith is one of my favorite musical artists of all time. A lot of people don't know this about me, but the Hammond organ is one of my favorite musical instruments that's ever been created. Since it was first put out in the mid-1950s, there's been some absolutely amazing records recorded with it, both it being featured and it just absolutely filling up a track or adding a pad like no other instrument can do. Most of the time, people have no idea what they're hearing in popular music or in music, but the Hammond organ is likely there. It's just one of those kind of instruments that has a way of creating space rather than taking it up, and it's just absolutely amazing. Now, Jimmy Smith, whose nickname among organists was God, was that because he basically was one of the pioneers of soul jazz throughout the 1960s. He came on the scene in the late 1950s, mid to late 1950s, really came into his own and recorded an insane amount of records throughout the 1960s into the early 70s when his type of music was extremely popular. He, in my opinion, embodies what musicians should embody when they play music. That is, they do it like they mean it. They don't do it like they're afraid to be heard. There's a certain amount of aggression and power in his playing, an amount of confidence that it just is gripping to a musician like me. So when I hear Jimmy Smith and the sound of that B-3 coming through my speakers, it just reaches out and grabs me by the throat. Now, I chose Organ Grinder Swing because it has my favorite lineup that was on a lot of Jimmy Smith records. Grady Tate played the drums, and he is just an insanely good drummer. He is famous for playing on a ton of people's records throughout his career. And one thing he's very famous for that most people don't realize is the Schoolhouse Rock TV series that was put out back in the day. He lent his voice to that, singing a number of those songs. Just a very famous musician that most people don't really know that much about. And also on guitar is Kenny Burrell, one of my favorite jazz guitar players of all time. He just has a way of playing what fits, and that particular group as a trio is amazing. Of course, Jimmy playing the bass line and the bass parts with his left hand and occasionally his foot. The B-3 is just amazing because you're using all of your limbs. You're using both hands, both feet, got the foot working the expression pedal, tapping the bass pedals. You've got the left hand that is either comping chords or walking bass lines, and you've got the right hand playing the solo stuff. It's just crazy, and if you've ever sat behind one of those instruments, it's like sitting in a cockpit flying an airplane. It's just amazing, and in the way that people like Jimmy Smith were able to just harness all of that and turn it into something as cool as the music he created is super special. So I wanted to recommend Organ Grinder Swing because the title track is just insane. You can hear Jimmy famously growling behind all of his playing, and it swings like no other. It's very aptly named. He also does a bunch of green sleeves, which he's famous for doing on this record. And one of my favorites, he does the jazz standard Satin Doll on here. It's just amazing instrumental music that, to me, it embodies an entire era. And it has just a specific sound that, to me, there's nothing like tone wheels and vacuum tubes and a Leslie, tone cabinet or speaker cabinet that just... It's like no other. It's intoxicating, and it's one of my favorite things. So if you have never heard of Jimmy Smith, do yourself a solid and look him up, and I would highly recommend you look up him doing Organ Grinder Swing. I know that you'll be happy that you did. So thanks for tuning in to Record Recommendations. If you like what you've heard, go ahead and like and subscribe. Hit the bell button to make sure you're notified of when I put new videos out. Go back and watch the Storied Sound episodes that these record recommendations are associated with. with if you haven't already done so. And be sure to check out the just the isolated demo videos as well if you don't have time to watch an entire story. So I thank you again for tuning in. I'm Reed from Everyman Vintage. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.